when Fred Ward died, one of the sad things that comes out of these actors dying is of course they're passing their loss, but then you get this moment where everyone talks about like the films that they love, and of course you're going to get the Tremors and you're going to get the Right Stuff. We covered both of those, and I promised you more Fred Ward, and more Fred Ward is coming. What's great about when an actor passes is that we get to discover these little gems.
That's the benefit, right? A lot of things that we haven't... I've never heard of this movie. Just to start out, I've never heard of this movie before.
I think I learned about this movie only after Fred Ward passed. I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And it's a film that got, like, among the genre fans, they were like, have you seen Cast a Deadly Spell? Oh, you've got to see it. It's like if noir was also horror. And I was like...
It's like...
Because you and me.
Right. Before we begin, I just want to sample. This is almost like Sam Raimi in the Coen Brothers doing a movie. It's almost like Army of Darkness meets... Miller's Crossing.
Yeah. It's like if you took your favorite genre and my favorite genre and squeezed them until it turned into exactly what I was looking for in my life.
Which is funny because the Coen Brothers got famous for working on the sets of Sam Raimi's films. So.
Yeah. So it's a springboard.
It's a springboard.
But today we're going to talk Cast a Deadly Spell in honor of the late, great Fred Ward. And we're going to talk about a movie that you should catch before it leaves streaming.
I'm going to cast you to like it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Just checking my notes here. Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, sincerely, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, you can support the show by joining the Patreon. We got some great content. We just talked about our top 3 famous vampire movies that we like.
Yeah.
Also, when you join the Patreon, you can get all the other content and opportunity to tell us what movies we can review in the future. With, of course, a big shout out to you.
Yeah, one of our patrons actually told us to watch Inner Space, a movie that we both really wanted to talk about, and we eventually got to because of our patrons. So thank you guys.
Also, you can see me at the Eau Claire Comic-Con September 9th. I'll be there in person. Come to my table. Check out some artworks I'll be selling. Also, if you want to just sit and talk movies, I love to talk movies with the complete strangers as well as fans of the show. So catch me on September 9th at Eau Claire. And today we're going to talk about, from 1991, oh God, I was in 7th grade when this came out, Cast a Deadly Spell.
Perfect. In the magical past of 1948, in the mythical little town of Los Angeles, private detective H. Philip Lovecraft seems to be the only man who doesn't use magic. When hired by the wealthy Amos Hackshaw to recover a stolen book, Lovecraft is sent on an unusual journey where he must contend with gremlins and gargoyles, confront his former partner and also an old flame, and potentially stop the coming of the Great Old One.
Let's get out the connection, because Fred Ward was famously in Tremors, but the cinematographer for this film, Cast a Deadly Spell, also did cinematography for Tremors. I just want to get that out. Yeah, there's the connection.
This guy knows how to shoot Fred Ward and make him look fantastic.
We missed the boat to have a dueling private detective TV show with Fred Ward and Dick Miller. I would pay money. It'd be imaginable how much money I would pay to see that.
Oh, I would have paid to see him and Clancy Brown every week.
Yeah, just two curmudgeons solving crimes. Oh my God,
they could have called it The Assholes.
All right, so Cast a Deadly Spell was made for HBO. I think it was only exclusively put on HBO. Kind of aired once, and then we're like, we're never going to see that again, kind of a thing.
Well, it's fascinating because the script took so long from like inception. I think it was a 10-year thing. It was called Lovecraft originally. And it was like Inception was 10 years before the film actually came out.
Okay.
So we're talking like something that has taken many, many years of love and respect. Screenplay by Joseph Doherty, who really did very few films, mostly known for TV. I think he did 30-something. He wrote for Pretty Little Liars. He did write Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, starring Daryl Hannah. So he's done a couple of films, but...
He wrote a lot of episodes for 30-somethings, which is interesting. You're a Gen Xer if you were in your 30-somethings watching 30-something. And I think he was in the 30s. He also did a lot of episodes for Judging Amy. So it's not really bad television. He actually was accomplished.
If you're going to put a TV movie together, he does seem like the right choice to write it. So
yeah, and it does have this flavor of feeling like it's a TV episode.
Yeah, it felt very much like a pilot to like what eventually would have been an HBO series. And the more I watched it, the more I was like, man, why didn't we get that?
Now, we kind of chopped at the director being kind of almost like a Coen Brothers, Sam Raimi film. But this is Martin Campbell. He's an accomplished director. He did GoldenEye as well as Casino Royale.
Yeah, two films that are often considered in contention for the best James Bond film ever. Like, people always go to GoldenEye and Casino Royale. It's like, no, this is the best one. He
hit all the right keys for Casino Royale. Every kind of it was perfect.
Yep.
And then he would do the Zorros, which he had the right flavor, temperament, and everything for the Zorros. Legend of the Zorro, the Mark of the Zorro with Antonio Banderas. Oh my God, somebody that's Latin is going to do Zorro. Shocking.
Ugh, I hate it. No,
Right,
I mean, finally.
Right. And then I would say for all his input from corporate getting their fingerprints all over it, he did the best he could with the Green Lantern.
I don't hate the Green Lantern like most people do. I think it's fine.
Right.
And and that's maybe the highest praise anyone's ever given to that film, but I don't think it's like the complete crapshoot that a lot of people say it is. It's just a movie that could have been better and definitely had that. I mean, it was going to be the jumping off for DC's universe before Man of Steel. And
but
I
my
think,
God,
had potential.
Nathan Fillion would have been perfect.
Perfect. Now we got it. So
yeah.
But yeah, Martin Campbell, right in that good time period where he was able to kind of do his own thing a little bit. He didn't have, and this is the kind of film that I don't expect HBO had a lot of like oversight into, because recently Martin Campbell has disappointed me quite a few times. He did that film The Protege a couple years ago. He did what I think was my least favorite film of last year, Memory, with Liam Neeson, which, interesting enough, called Memory. I have no memory of it.
Liam Neeson has memory of it.
I know, yeah.
Right.
It's just another taken.
Liam Neeson's been on this kind of Charles Bronson thing of just making movies for movies kind of thing.
Yeah.
You do one arch character and you just make a bunch of movies out of it.
Yeah, but then again, some people like Fred Ward did pretty well playing very similar characters throughout his life. So
yeah. All right, so let's talk about stars. Oh my God, Clancy Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Krabs.
Yeah, babyface Clancy Brown from Highlander. Yeah. Very much, I think, cast it right. I think this is it's almost like the Albert Finney of Miller's Crossing kind of a guy.
Clancy Brown's the kind of person that plays bad really well. Like, you like his bad characters. You like his character in Highlander. His character in Shawshank Redemption is this, like, love-to-hate kind of a thing. He's even does great voice work. If you don't know, he actually voiced Surtur, the giant creature from Thor Ragnarok. So it's kind of like he's still like, even just like his voice works so well in that film. And again, who doesn't love him as Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob?
And Fred Ward's doing his best Sam Spade kind of a character is Philip Marlowe. His name is H.P. Lovecraft. We'll get to that in a minute. Julianne Moore. This is kind of before Julianne Moore was Julianne Moore. Yeah, this is kind of...
Yeah, I feel like she popped with like Shortcuts and Safe.
Shortcuts and Safe, and then she really, with Big Lebowski, boom, she's a star in the Boogie Nights, and then after that, she went into the stratosphere.
Spielberg, and she's doing all these different things then. So
yeah, it's interesting in the movie that, she's a redhead. Let's get her in many green dresses we possibly can.
Yeah. Hey, that's good lighting.
Yeah, and it's an interesting note. This is right a year after Dick Tracy. This is right before Rocketeer. It kind of fits those kind of things.
Yeah.
Where you have the lounge singer, and everybody's encapsulated by the lounge singer, which is Jennifer Connelly did.
Yeah. Kind of that heightened view of the older time period.
And then Madonna did in Dick Tracy, the lounge singer. Oh my God, your voice. It's a siren to me.
I kept thinking of a great double feature with this film and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Because they both just have that embrace of like a completely out of left field detective story, but you're still hitting all the same beats, and both films would still feel unique and different.
Offshoot, did you know Who Framed Roger Rabbit was supposed to be Chinatown Part 3? The script was supposed to be the third Chinatown.
Given my thoughts on Chinatown, I'm happy it ended up being Roger Rabbit.
Right. It was supposed to be like the town getting decimated, but to put the highway through. And it just didn't develop. Jack Nicholson didn't want to do it, and somebody's like, well, just recycle it and do this kind of thing to it. Yeah. It's a whole new adventure for that movie. Okay. And then you have cinematographer is Alexander, my God, Gruzinski. He's from Poland. We talked about he did Tremors, but also from the 90s, if you remember, Brian Bosworth was this star football player who actually suffered an injury in his pro football, I think a knee injury. So his career was over, but he was a high star athlete. He was all over ESPN as college football star. He did these, 80s haircut. And they tried to make him a movie star, and it was called Stone Cold. Yep. And he did cinematography for it. It's a cult classic. People look for this movie, and it's so bad it's good because they try to escalate him into movie stardom. And it just kind of fell flat the entire time. But it's interesting, though, that he did the cinematography for that.
Brian Bosworth is one of those actors that you call when Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't pick up the line. Like, you were just like, he's close enough, yeah.
Yeah. But he also did the cinematography for The Craft, which I think is a wonderful job he did with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a giant fan of The Craft. Like many others from my
because you're not a girl
time period. No, I mean, it's a gorgeous looking movie.
Oh,
that
right.
movie is incredible looking.
Right.
Even if I don't completely connect to the film itself, it looks great, and that's one of the things I like when I'm forced to watch it by my wife.
But you've never been a teenage girl in high school, and I think a lot of people...
You don't know that.
Yeah, but it's funny I say that because a guy wrote the screenplay.
Exactly, the guy directed it too.
An interesting challenge. He did the cinematography for the movie 54, which is about Studio 54. It came to and a lot of people are mad because it didn't give the pop and pizzazz and flavor of experiencing going to 54. It was the underbelly, the very dark underbelly of the entire escape. Check it out. It did get a lot of reviews because it didn't expectations. People thought we were just going to this dance video.
And if you're given the option, check out the director's cut, which is the one that's on home video right now. It's a pretty good movie. It's just it came out at the same time as Boogie Nights, and it was obviously.
And this is This is right before Austin Powers, and Mike Myers is doing a serious role, and people like, oh, you did Austin Powers, now you're doing this movie where you're kind of this bad, you're kind of like the enemy. And people, it just didn't hit the right notes at the time. The timing was off. Check out the movie. I think you'll love 54. We should review it eventually.
Yeah, we should. Yeah.
Okay, back to A Cast of Deadly Spell.
Yeah. Other people I want to mention, because there's some other great performances in here. David Warner, who is the guy that's in everything and unfortunately passed away last year.
Scream 2.
Scream 2. He was in Ninja Turtles 2. He was the TGRI scientist. Go Ninja, go Ninja, go. He got
For me, as a Gen Xer, it's always Tron and The Omen.
See, I forget about Tron because it's just like Tron, like the star of Tron is not the actors. The star of Tron is everything else in that movie.
He's doing his best Darth Vader bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those actors that always seemed confident, never seemed like he was about to lose his head, except in The Omen. And then, just one of the greatest Tales from the Crypt episodes as well.
Right.
He was just everything he was in popped because of his presence.
He's a world treasure. He kind of cements and gravitates the movie. Everybody else can go wild. But he's also he's almost like the Charles Watts of the Rolling Stones. He just sits there and he prevents the gravity of just the stableness of
even
he's
though
not
he
a
might be
the bad guy.
When you think about the movie, whatever movie he's in, when you think about it, it's not him you think about. When you see his name in the credits and you see him pop up in a film, you're
gold.
like, oh, we're safe. We're in a safe place.
Yeah, David Warner
was still doing great movies like 2-3 years ago. He was still doing great movies.
Yeah, because then it's one of those like David Warner is in. All right, we got a movie.
Yeah, like no one's saying David Warner when they say Titanic, but the moment he shows up, you're like, oh, he's an asshole.
Another shout out is Charles Hallahan. Yeah. Now, for us Gen Xers, we recognize him as the Hunter's boss from the TV show Hunter.
Oh,
yeah.
I always think about the chest scene in The Thing. He got to be in The Thing, and got to have another one who lost his head because that film where he's like. It's coming off the body, oh man. Good
He's
stuff.
also in The Thing, but I also remember, because, I was 10 and 11, 12 when Hunter came out, and he's one of those I always shouted at Hunter, he's always back in the 80s where the captain of the police always had to shout at their detectives.
Well, and his character gives a little bit of sense that there might be more to this film than just Lovecraft inspirations because he's Detective Bradbury. And I think there's an opportunity if this had become a major franchise or a television series, you don't just have Lovecraft you could have pulled from, you could have pulled a little bit from Bradbury. And you could have, every season almost, if this was a show, you could have brought in the new detective with a new classical last name and then started taking other influences. It could have been the Stranger Things of the 90s.
If you thought Stephen King writes a lot, Bradbury was out of his mind.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote maybe 2 books in a week.
Yeah. Well, as we pointed out as well, Lovecraft wrote quite a bit too. This is the tome of his complete fiction, and this is very thin pages. And if you can move yourself past all the racist parts, there's some pretty great stories in there.
Extremely racist. But this is before computers. These guys were on the typewriter cranking out stories.
Yeah. And you couldn't go back and edit, so you might as well just keep on going forward.
Right.
The film. We should also mention produced by Gail Ann Hurd. If you're a fan of The Terminator, or if you've been one of those people that's been watching The Walking Dead for the last 45 years. She's been a major presence in film production for decades now.
I think Gail likes to work with people who understand what they're presenting.
Yeah.
She's not one that get her fingerprints you need to do this. Terminator, she understands James Cameron's vision, what we're going to do. Let's get it made.
Yeah.
Instead of injecting her point of view.
I've often said, there's been that discussion, and I don't like to get into the politics of it, but this whole discussion of rumors that Kathleen Kennedy might be leaving Lucasfilm, and I keep thinking, man, they need to get Gail Ann Hurd, because I think she's like the right kind of, I'm going to make sure when I put you in this position that I can leave you alone afterwards and just let you keep going. Because that's kind of how, you're right. I mean, getting James Cameron, she was like, I understand exactly what Cameron's going to do. I'm going to let him do it. She's never been one to be a safe producer. When you look at her entire catalog, she has consistently taken risky projects with risky people and turned out some really great stuff. And this is another one of those cases of like,
this is very risky. Right. It's interesting, though, this it came out in 1981, but it's also one of those mixed genres that we love to do in the 80s. And this is kind of came from the 80s, even though it's 1991. This is kind of a bridge of 80s, but what we're going to do in the 90s. We're going to kind of get a little more curmudgeon, a little more depressing, a little more
grunge music.
Grunge music, you know, life sucks. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. You know, we'd mentioned that kind of thing actually on one of our Patreon videos. Join the Patreon to check it out, about vampire films. Where, like in the 80s, there was all this combination of genre that wasn't successful really, and didn't become successful until later on. And that seems to be the case with this film again as well. It came out, it had like a minor pop, but then didn't really stay the landing with like HBO, to the point where it's sometimes not even available on HBO's service. And if you're not in America, it's not on the HBO service. You have to find a copy of it on YouTube. So it's like, again, this film has yet to really strike the landing and has become that word of mouth piece that we probably wouldn't have heard about, you know, except for the tragedy of losing words. So
well, this is perfect time to talk about a little bit of review of Cast a Deadly Spell. Okay, this is first time hearing about it, and this is first time seeing it for both of us.
Yeah.
So of course, let's hand it off to Kyle.
Well, let's just
because you
put it
picked
like
this. Yeah.
There is a certain type of wavelength that you can hit for a film where you can almost do anything that I'll love. And this film just hits that wavelength from the very early on. The influences here are spectacularly on my wavelength. The practical creature effects, the taking the horror aspects but mixing it with something else. Where there's no other film like this movie.
Yeah.
And that's what I love so much about it. The only film that's maybe like this movie, and I still haven't seen it yet, is this film's sequel, Witch Hunt, which starred Dennis Hopper in the role of Lovecraft and was directed by Paul Schrader, which we are going to talk about. There's no way about getting around that. But there's no other films that are really like Cast a Deadly Spell. And it's one of those cases where you have such a dynamic cast. You have a director that is perfect for this film. You have a studio that was willing to put behind the effort of, like, make this movie and make it as frickin' weird as you want, and we're going to be in on it. And that's what happened.
Weirdness, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's a mixture of noir meets horror movies.
Yeah.
I see the inspiration for it. I don't like this as much as you do.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why everybody likes it. It's very, all of a sudden you open a car and there's gremlins. And you're like, what the hell is this? Right?
Well, and it's not just Gremlins like a Joe Dante reference to Gremlins. I mean, Gremlins were really that thing that was talked about during World War II, is they were the things that would chew up your plane, you know, and cause your plane malfunctions. Well, that's what they're doing here, you know?
I'm not going to jump on the springboard as much as you because I think it's a little too, I don't want to do this, a little too safe. I would like a little more danger to this.
Yeah.
I would like a little more mixture of, look, let's just go Hellraiser on this a little more. And the Hellraiser came out in 87.
Yep.
I would like it's HBO, for God's sakes, do some danger. And
I think that's why
I understand. Fred Ward sells it hard. I love it. He fits perfect for a private detective that's seen it all and had enough of it, and he wants the lounge singer. I love that mixture of it. But when you show, like in the bathroom scene, somebody getting killed by paper cuts, go head to toe with Hellraiser on that.
Yeah, that's
Make it
fair.
a circus, right? Julianne Moore's in sell Julianne Moore a little bit better, almost like Jennifer Connelly did in Rocketeer.
Yeah.
Really, just I want to crave her almost.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and a little bit like it since it's HBO. Fucking A, man, just do it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What I think about it is, part of me feels like, and this is just, there's not a lot of background information about this film, so I'm going off on how I feel about this film.
I don't hate it.
Yeah.
I if somebody puts it on, I'll rewatch it.
Yeah, and I feel like this is one where I would go out and buy the Blu-ray if you released one. Anyway, when it comes to this film, I feel like there was a plan here to either springboard this film into a series, or springboard this film into a film franchise that would have regular appointments on HBO, like every year a new Lovecraft adventure. And if that's the case, I'm comfortable with the first film feeling a little safe.
It does feel
because
like
it
a
feels
pilot.
like something that you would maybe get a little crazier as you go. It's kind of like on the show Lost. The first episode of Lost is the plane crashes. They're not time traveling in the first episode of Lost, but they get there by season 5. You know, it feels like a springboard to get to the zanier stuff later on.
That's a springboard's a nice word. Yeah, because I think if you let's push buttons a little bit later
Yeah.
rather than now, and I think that's the whole point of the element of kind of keeping the temperament before we can get more into it.
Yeah, because it's while I expected the film to, I was expecting the Lovecraft influences to be kind of more low key in the film. Not a good or bad thing, but I was just expecting it to be a little bit more of like a reference to Lovecraft as opposed to something that was like, when they were looking for the book, my mind didn't automatically go to the Necronomicon. When they said that they were talking about, but when the Necronomicon came, I was like, well, maybe we're going to get Cthulhu at the end. And what I really appreciate about the film is it's not even really a Cthulhu mythos thing. They actually take one of the big old ones, but not like the main old one. They take Yog-Sothoth, which I only know because I played the Arkham horror games. Like, they took kind of these like smaller investment character kind of pieces and started building the world out from there. I think that this is definitely something where we would have eventually had like a Cthulhu-esque reference to the film, and that it would have springboarded off into other things. We just didn't really get there because this first film didn't hit the way I think HBO wanted it to. But I definitely think there's the potential to do more.
I was just looking it up because I think a lot of inspiration came from like Darren Gavin doing The Night Stalker.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or something like that. But that is a little bit safe. That's made for TV.
That's also made for TV. Yeah.
And I would love it to escalate. You're on HBO. Do Night Stalker and Noir, and you do Sam Raimi, just explode the blood all over him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And it does feel like a pilot.
Yeah.
And it does feel like, all right, we'll send it to the producers, and HBO is like, I don't know.
I will say this. You mentioned safe in terms of like, I guess it's rating. Because I mean, the film is still R-rated, but like there's a safety level in like, it's not as violent as I expected. It's not as sweary. There's a lot less nudity than what HBO would almost commonly be known for. Yeah. But I do want to give it credit for having the balls to go pretty heavy on practical effects in terms of there's a lot of monsters in the film.
I would give a lot of credit to that. I agree.
I actually think the Yog-Sothoth creature design is really cool. The gargoyle that's like the henchman that's hunting him the whole time. I think a lot of this stuff works. Yeah. And you know what? It's that tangibility about a practical effect that I find more successful than if this movie had been made today with a
CGI of just something.
It feels real, it feels tangible, and even though I know it's a guy in a costume, I don't care. I'm invested in what's going on. So you got to give credit to him for that. The fact that the idea of the film itself is the risk. That is the going out there, because not a lot of studios or television networks would have gone there.
I agree with you because there's a lot of things. What's the word? Palpable.
Yeah.
There's a heart to this movie that's not even in China Moon. There's a heart to this movie, even though it doesn't hit the right beats and the timing's off. And it's a lot of the discredit for me. And I'll still watch the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a core to this movie that needs to be going back to.
Yeah. And this is one where it's in the constant search for streaming service IP. The fact that HBO has not even considered a Cast a Deadly Spell as a series. Yeah. Like, you don't have to just, you could pick up with a new person playing Lovecraftian, we don't have Ward anymore, or you could just start over from fresh and kind of like use all the elements that you thought worked here and springboard us into a series. The fact that they've not even tried that is insane to me, because every single studio and every single streaming service is looking for content right now, and this is a perfect thing to do today.
Yeah, especially they're looking not for original content. If you want to get something made, it has to come from a source originally, something like
something you don't have to pay for. They own this.
So something comes from a book, a remake, a source material like The Last Voyage of Demeter is based on Dracula. So if you want to get things made now, original screenplays are not going to work. You need something from comes back. This is right. Someone needs to come back and say, "I can do this."
Yeah, there's definitely that kind of
a core to it that is going to still be there. There's a heart to this.
Yeah, this is a movie that kind of reminds me of like a Near Dark or like The Devils, where it's like, because you don't have a home video version, because it wasn't in a video store in the same way. I mean, yeah, they had a VHS that came out, but like, because this film doesn't circulate in that kind of a way and exists purely on a streaming service, it does get lost in the shuffle. Yeah. And I think that this is a movie that exists because of that word of mouth. I'm so happy that people discussed this film as well as the big ones when Fred Ward passed, because I'd never heard of this until this year. Yeah. And it's a movie that I think will probably become a staple of mine going forward. I think it's one of those perfect infusions of, we're going to take two things and put them together and do both quite well. And I really, really found the
I'm glad you really enjoy it.
Yep.
wishing there's something better. I understand. This came out right when Dick Tracy came out. This came out right when Rocketeer came out. It's part of that mixture.
Yep.
And if you want to elevate from that, be a little more dangerous.
Yeah.
But I understand you can't be a little more dangerous because it's a pilot. But
yeah,
now you
because
can.
I want to know more about what was the intention for this film. Was it to go somewhere afterwards? Was it to, because again, like I said, it did have a sequel.
Unless you want to do camp and do the little gremlins and just be annoyance, like, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I don't know who this movie is for. And part of it is that I think we're viewing it through the lens of HBO today, where HBO today has Game of Thrones and they have Euphoria and they have all these like hard-edged, lots of nudity, lots of violence kinds of shows. But we forget that back in the 80s and early 90s, HBO also had films like Mom and Dad Save the World. Or like the HBO
that
made a
parody
lot of these
news program.
Yeah. So like they had a lot of these kinds of things that weren't exactly adults only, but it was just more of like we're going to put money into this. A $15 million TV movie was kind of unheard of at the time.
They had that satirical news program that was very much like what Jon Stewart was doing on Comedy Central.
So they were really kind of testing the waters of what you could do with a television network. Yeah. And it's too bad that this film just got sunk down inside of there, because I think music, Kurt Sobel, who did the music for Flamingo Kid, did the music for, I think, a really underrated Alien Nation, did the music here. I think the score works really well in hitting the beats of horror and hitting the beats of noir. I think the film is shot with elements of horror and elements of noir. I think there is a specific love for those two subgenres and that merging.
I have to say it, I would develop the love story a little bit more to give convinced that Julianne Moore and Fred Ward have a connection. A little more chemistry together. A little more screen time together.
Maybe some backstory. Because I think, the film runs at a quick pace at 96 minutes. This is a film that I think a longer version could have helped.
Because you understand in noirs, he meets the femme fatale, Julianne Moore, and then he's condemned.
Yeah.
No matter how, and that's the Fred Ward, like, I would love to see Fred Ward that's going, oh, God.
This is
He's
a movie
wreck
where
my life.
I would ask for more of a lot. That would maybe be my biggest flaws with it, is I felt like I wanted more than what the film gave me.
Exactly.
Part of it is not even just the Julianne Moore character. His landlord, Hippolyta, this witch who is kind of, he's owing money to the whole time, but also acts as his kind of friend. So it's kind of this like love-hate, push-pull relationship that they have.
Yeah.
I wanted to know more about that, because she opens the film. It feels like, again, like she's going to have a larger presence. If this was a show, I feel like she would have a larger presence. I wanted more of his relationship to Hippolyta, because it's kind of got this almost like James Bond and Mrs. Moneypenny, where they're not going to get together, but there's this love that they kind of have. That's not a romantic love, not a sexual love, but like a, ongoing kind of a thing. I wanted more than what they had.
And change the title.
I changed the title.
Make it a little more dangerous.
I don't know that Lovecraft was a great title either, the original title, but I think it might have been a little bit better. Cast a Deadly Spell is tough because it doesn't sound like it's an R-rated noir horror film.
Something dangerous, something Clive Barker would put on his title.
Yeah. It's just that the movie itself is a bit of a hard sell, much like Dick Tracy and Rocketeer, two movies that didn't make any money when they came out. There's also the issue of, if you make this movie again today, you probably don't want to have a subplot where you've got to get a 17-year-old laid.
I would, if I remade it, I would really inspired by Clive Barker, and Sam Raimi, but then a little bit of noirs like what they did with in the 40s, Art Gale's noir 40s. Yeah.
What I would say is, if you were going to do this today, I would make it as a series. There are very few movies that I say would work better as a TV show. And this would either be something, I think, work it as like hour and a half long episodes, make it like television movies in a series, but then get like get a really good genre director to do each one of them. Give me like a Sam Raimi episode. Give me a John Carpenter episode. Like bring in those kinds of like 80s Twilight Zones, Amazing Stories people, and give them an episode to tell their detective story, and they can each bring something new to the table. And I think that's what's missing here.
And the music. Music kind of...
Oh, I like the music. I like Sobel's score
we're so different on this.
Oh,
okay.
Man.
All right. All right. I need a punch to this. All right. Last things. Keep the conversation going. What would you do about this movie? Have you seen the movie? My God, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, if you're in America, it's on Max. If you're not in America, it's on YouTube. The quality's a little bit lower on YouTube, but you can find it there. And then come back and tell us your thoughts on the film. Have you seen the sequel with Dennis Hopper? It's something I want to watch, but I heard it's not as good. So let us know your thoughts down below on that. And yeah, like Nick said, what would you do? Would you make this a TV series? Would you make it a film series? How would you present this film today?
A little
because
more
there's an
dangerous. A
opportunity.
little more like Spawn, the animated series.
Yeah, there's some things I would do. Actually, an animated episode would be cool. Anyway,
Animated would work, yeah.
So yeah, let us know your thoughts down below. We love having these kinds of conversations, and we love finding these kind of like hidden gem movies. So thank you to all the people who tweeted at me and said, watch this movie, because I didn't know it existed. And yeah, thank you guys for joining us. You can find all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
Hi, you can find my show, The St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right, so you go ahead and cast your deadly spells. Just don't cast them at us.